my name is Crispin Jensen, owner and founder of LifeStart Training. This week, we will be diving into barriers to Canadians taking first aid and why we need to think outside of the box, part 1 of 2. Okay, so let's get to it. So oftentimes, it's terrifying during an emergency situation if you don't feel like you are confident enough to do something. 36% of Canadians are not first aid trained, which could be a contributing factor in our extremely low out-of-hospital cardiac survival rates. We really need to dive in and look at why do people not want to take first aid training. I can give you the top 5 things that I hear regularly in my class. The first one, first aid training is boring. 2, it's too time consuming and takes way too long. 3, they overcomplicate everything and I end up leaving there having absolutely no idea what I'm supposed to do. 4, it's too expensive. And 5, there's a test at the end and I don't read or write the best. So let's take a minute and think about those 5 points and break them down. The first point, as my slogan says, why should training to save lives bore you to death? There has to be a better way that can engage participants so that they feel like they are immersed in the program and it's targeted to meet their specific learning styles. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The old way of doing things does not work and does not provide higher retention rates or education. We live in a world where attention spans are less than 10 minutes at a time. Having somebody sit for 14 to 16 hours in a classroom listening to an instructor drone on and on and on while switching from one PowerPoint to the next is not a conducive environment for adult learners. Our focus is limited to 10 minutes or less, and sitting for 2 or 3 hours at a time does absolutely nothing but make people zone out and think, what am I going to do? What do I need for groceries? What am I going to cook for supper tonight? So the question is, how can you capture their attention? How can you recreate an unboring course? The answer, honestly, is pretty simple. Create something that hits all of the learning styles. Add in a bit of humor, a joke here or there, or some real-world applicable scenarios. No, this isn't going to be as fun as going to a carnival or a movie or whatever your ideal extracurricular is. The whole idea is that if you can create something that is engaging and isn't completely claw your eyes out boring, participants will actually pay attention and maybe learn something incredibly valuable. The second most common complaint that I get is it's too time consuming. I can agree with you for this, for basic and intermediate first aid training. Okay, but here's the thing. You're not going to become a doctor. You're not a nurse. You're not a paramedic. Your job is to keep the person alive and comfortable until EMS arrives. There is absolutely no need for participants to memorize and know all of the medical terminology during a first aid class. All that you really need to know is that you're pumping on a chest hard and fast to make all the circulation flow around your body to keep your brain and all your vital organs alive. That's kind of what you need to know. If anything, the Canadian Standards Association may want to look at a 4th level of training opposed to the 3 that they currently have. It is impossible for participants to memorize 2 full days of training and remember all of the content 3 years later when their certificate is up for renewal. However, if we can simplify the content and get to the point and not drag it out and be so concerned about memorizing all of the technical components, their ability to be able to perform CPR during an emergency situation could very well be higher. It would also give participants the confidence that if they can act in an emergency and do something instead of doing nothing and just panicking, this could help with our survival rates. Most workplaces only require employees to assist during a medical situation. Okay, so it's for a brief period of time. Further to that, various levels of training should be specific to the industry and the hazard assessments. Elevated risk professions should require more advanced training and more frequently, whereas somebody working in a grocery store only needs to know the basics of first aid to assist during a medical emergency. Stay tuned next week for part 2 of barriers to Canadians taking first aid.